Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. I chose for the topic today, the hope of 7 generations. I want to talk about the idea of our ancestors, that none of us arrives here as a tabula rasa, a blank slate, that we arrive in context. We arrive into a system, or many systems that are here. And I believe that we arrive as individualized spirit. Those of you who have had multiple kids, you know everyone is different, and you know it. There's a person that has arrived in your family. And so as I'm thinking about Black history and thinking about the struggle for equality and inclusion, freedom, and equity, that's the word that we really want. I think about those who would say, well, didn't that all end? Didn't we, pass the Emancipation Proclamation? Isn't that over? Well, there's a little more history that came after that. Reconstruction and Jim Crow. But then there was the Civil Rights Act. Didn't that take care of it? Or isn't it all done now? Yeah, it's not. I have a friend, dear friend of yours too, Lainey, whose mother was a congresswoman, and she had moved to Dallas a little before I did in the 80s, and an accomplished, educated woman. She's driving up to a stoplight, and she's just feeling the life spread out before her, and then next to her, a group of young white men pulled up next to her, and they just looked over, and they just said the N-word to her. And she shared with me the violence of that interaction, the pain of it. It was just shocking to her. So we know it's still here. So I want to speak, before I get into, I too am going to focus on the positives as we're talking about the gifts of the generations, the hope of 7 generations. But I want to start by saying that, and I think I saw my friend Patty here today, and she may have had to step out, but she and I were talking, or texting, and she said something about this journey of healing we do as individuals, and she said, trauma gets laid down in layers, and it gets healed in the same way. And that was so profound. I asked her, what book is that from? She said, there you are. She said, I just said it, because it's the truth of her journey. And I think about that when I think about how we're going to heal the inequality in our culture. It's not going to be healed when we lay down these bodies. It's not. There's going to still be work to be done for future generations. But our hope is that we're a part of the healing. We move it forward. We evolve human consciousness somewhat, enough so that more people can connect to the deep truth of our connection, of our divinity, the intrinsic worthiness of every human being, that no one is created better than another. And so on one side of that is like there have been these systems of injustice that have, chosen groups of people, not just Black people, LGBT people, LGBTQIA+, I don't know. I remember in the 90s, early 90s, I was on a date with a young man, and we were at a museum in Dallas, and he was a little younger than I was and a little more active in the political world. He asked if he could hold my hand, and I attempted to, and I couldn't. I just said, I just can't. I was too afraid of the judgment, the possibility of violence. I couldn't do it. And that, for me, was the opening that here I get almost every privilege, I'm going to say that word, almost every privilege that our society offers as a white, able-bodied, almost said straight, that's not true, white, able-bodied man. And yet here's this one area in which I am a minority group, and it opened my eyes to what people go through who are excluded, who are preyed upon. And you know, I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to move to a different place. But I know that woke has become a big political live wire. Like, we don't say that word. But you know what it was originally brought forward to mean? It's just people who have awakened to the oppression of other people. That's all it means. People who are awake to inequality in the world. That's all that it means. And it's become this like division point when it's meant to be a healing point. That when we awaken to this inequality, guess what? We can heal it. And our part, those of us who are here, and most of us in this room, well, I would say we're sort of the householder stage, according to Buddhist tradition, that we're the ones paying the bills. We're the ones running things. And we have to honor those who came before us and build upon the successes and the growth that they created, and we have to prepare the next generations to take it further. That's what we're here to do. And so, sometimes at this stage of life, we get comfy. We feel like, I've done enough. I've done my part. I'm just going to coast into the next incarnation, I guess. And what I'm inviting us into is an awakening of our possibility, of the promise that we still have within us to be a place of change. You know, I graduated from ministerial school in 2009. I took a position at Center for Spiritual Living in Reno, and I loved my time there. I was there 2 years before Reverend Howard Caesar went, come here. But it was not a very diverse community. And when Howard brought me here, actually a year before I came to work, I just came as a guest singer and did a workshop, and I looked out and saw the beautiful diversity in this church. And I loved that. I missed that. And it's something we have cultivated. It's something that we value, treasure so highly. And it's something that we want to continue to make a greater space for. And I know that has been challenging for some. I've had some of my black friends here in the church say that they get it from their friends and family saying, why are you going to that white church? And so we say that we're not. We're not a white church. That we are a church of inclusion, a church of love, a church that holds this possibility that we, the ones who are here now, might make it a little better for those who come after. So thank you for being a part of this. None of that is in my talk, so I'm just now going to get started on my sermon. So I'm not kidding. That was just me being inspired by you, Dooney. So here's what I want to say, that there is generational pain and trauma. This idea of the seventh generation, it comes in a couple of different places in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible. It talks about the sins of the father will be visited on the sons for 7 generations. And what that really means metaphysically is that when we think of sin as being missing the mark, false ideas, false beliefs about the way God is, the way the world is, those are systems of thought that get ingrained into families, and we all have them. All of us got wrong messages, untruths in our family of origin about who we are. And so that's what it means. Those are generational. In the Native American tradition, it says that we take no action without considering how it will impact the 7 generations going forward. And we need more of this generational thinking. Jean Marino were talking before the service. We're both Gen Xers. I am the elder of the Gen X generation, born in 1966. People forget about us. There's like the boomers, and then there's the millennials, but we're here too. We were those latchkey kids, that we came home and parents just let us do whatever we were going to do. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful there was no internet. But we're this idea that each of us is here for a time to bring the good of what has come before us, to offer our own insights, education, our own brilliance into what can happen, and then prepare for those who are coming after. Our purpose statement in this church says this: in community, we nurture and, what is it, Stacy? We nurture and empower each other, transforming our lives that we may serve the world. This community for 104 years has been a place of offering spiritual tools and principles for personal healing so that we can be a part of humanity's healing. That's the point. That it's not just that we get our stuff healed, our false beliefs, our old ideas, so we can get our prosperity going and then we're off the hook. Well, we're not on the hook, but we're invited into the possibility of healing for everyone. I do have a joke. Do you want to hear it? I'm so fascinated by this generational idea. This actually, again, comes from the internet, a real-life interaction. The daughter is in the living room. She says, "Alexa, play Let It Go." And her mom says, "Do you know what we had to do?" She said, she's a Gen Xer. So what we had to do is we had to call the radio station, be on hold for 30 minutes, request our favorite song, and then we stood by the radio with our boombox and a blank cassette tape to try and get our song. And her daughter looked at her and said, "I didn't understand a word of what you just said." Every generation has a different thing to do, a different job, a different set of gifts. Think about, how often do we just jump on a plane and fly anywhere in the world? Think about how our grandparents and great-grandparents would have considered that. It's miraculous. And also the issues, the problems that we deal with, our grandparents would have been horrified, mystified, but we're the ones. Okay. So my real inspiration for this talk is a song lyric by Susan Werner. The song is called "May I Suggest." There is a hope that's been expressed in you, the hope of 7 generations, maybe more. And this is the faith that they invest in you, is that you'll do one better than was done before. And inside you'll know, inside you'll understand, inside you'll know what's yours to finally set right. And I suggest, yes, I suggest to you, I suggest this is the best part of our lives, that this is a blessing to draw breath and to be in this world with all of its pain and problems. Because while there is generational trauma and pain, there is also ancestral light and power that we can draw upon those who came before. They are with us still. We don't have any strong teaching in New Thought and Unity about the ancestors, but I have come to understand that they are here with us and that they are giving their love forward. They are supporting us in ways unseen to help us heal ourselves and the world. And we can call upon them. We can call upon the hope and the power and the light of the ancestors in this time, that we can do one better than was done before. You can applaud. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gwen. But I wanted to speak of a different kind of ancestors as well today. I want to talk about our spiritual ancestors, those who came before. I think of Bertha Miller and, help me, Lillian Brass Black. They were the first leaders of this community, starting in 1919 in Bertha's living room in the Heights. That we have generations of spiritual leaders and thinkers and volunteers and doers who we rest upon. These doors were open when you got here, weren't they? Someone paid for this before you got here, and this building, which we'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary of this sanctuary next year, that most of us got here after that. So somebody else did this, and many of you were here. Many of you built this. And going all the way back, that we have ancestors who had so connected. Like Bertha had just moved here with her family from Kansas. She had been studying these brand new unity teachings of personal transformation and healing and possibility, metaphysics, that she began to invite people in her neighborhood there in the Heights to come and study with her. She had a correspondence course. And other people began to get that feeling. Oh, I have power in my thought to change my experience of life. And so that was the beginning. Now, 104 years, we've been here teaching, inviting celebrating this power of transformation that God has given us and is simply waiting for us to use. My favorite quote from Emily Cady from Lessons in Truth, desire in the heart is always God tapping at the doors of your consciousness with infinite supply. A supply that is forever useless unless there be made a demand upon it. Do you get this? The universe is saying yes. The universe is giving you all that you need for a life of freedom, fulfillment, health, abundance, love, joy. This is yours. And all that needs to change is your thinking. All that has to happen, that's a lot more than just nothing. That's a lot. But all that needs to change is your acceptance of who you are as a daughter, as a son of God. So I think about Bertha and Lillian. I think about Myrtle and Charles. I think about Emily Cady. And then, I study. That's one of my chief spiritual practices. So I study the great teachings of Christianity. Thomas Merton. I love Thomas Merton. The Buddhist teachers. I love Jack Kornfield. I love Tara Brach. These are some of them are contemporaries, but some of the ones who've already passed, they are my spiritual ancestors. And there's Howard Thurman. I want to share a little bit about today. Many of you know who he is. Howard Thurman was the grandson of a woman who was born in slavery in Daytona, Florida, a very poor agricultural family. But he was bright, and somebody saw that he was bright, and they gave him opportunities. He ended up becoming the chaplain at Boston University. He was the dean of other incredible educational organizations I can't think right now. He was a minister and a scholar and an author. He was the godfather of the civil rights movement. His book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was the blueprint for Martin Luther King Jr. to bring spiritual awareness to social inequity. He was amazing. He talked about the time with his grandmother that he said there are two stories she would tell that always stayed with him growing up on a plantation in North Florida. One was when the plantation owner would bring the white preacher in to preach to the black church there on the plantation. And that preacher would always quote the Bible, "Slaves, be obedient to your masters in all things." Howard's grandmother never learned to read, but she always knew there was a secret power in it, that when the slave owner's daughter tried to teach her some numbers or letters, the daughter was punished, so she knew there was something people were keeping from her. She remained illiterate, but she made sure that her grandson Howard had all he needed. And his job every day was to read the Bible to her. And she never let him read anything from the Apostle Paul because of that passage, "Slaves, be obedient." He said, sometimes I could sneak in 1 Corinthians 13. The other story that she told that he remembered was when there was a black freedman who was a preacher, and he would travel around and he would preach in the churches on the plantation. And she said he would get quiet. And then he would look them in the eye and he's saying, "You are not a slave. You are not the N-word. You are the daughter and son of God." And when Howard would recall that when his grandmother would say that, she would rise up, her spine would get straight, her chest would go forward. That was miraculous. And through Howard Thurman, through his writings, it's come to me, this message of power and change. Howard went on to found a multiracial church in San Francisco in the 1940s, which is still in existence today. He knew that he was to minister not just to black folks, but he wanted to speak to the coming together against racial lines and divisions. An amazing man. This is a quote from his book, Jesus and the Disinherited. A little background here, that in the 1948, there was a big flood in the Columbia River in Portland, and there was a town that had been set up as sort of a project houses after World War II, and it's called Vanport. And then during the flood, Vanport was destroyed and never rebuilt, and this is what Howard Thurman writes in his book. During the Great Vanport, Oregon disaster, when rising waters left thousands homeless, and many people of Portland who prior to that time were sure of their white supremacy, they opened their homes to Negroes, Mexicans, and Japanese. The result was that they were all confronted with the experience of universality. They were no longer white, black, and brown. They were men, women, and children in the presence of the operation of impersonal nature. He had a vision for what's possible in our churches, in our culture, and he is my spiritual ancestor. The last thing I want to talk about today is I am my own grandpa. Do you remember that song? It was a strange little novelty song. I've lost you, haven't I? You can be your own ancestor. Did you know that? You can be that wise being holding the space of healing for your own self. I've been aware of this idea of the fact that we're really not bound by time, that we are spiritual beings, and we're able to communicate to past and future selves. That has come in different ways. It's been powerful for me. I don't understand it completely. But I had an experience recently I want to share with you. A friend of mine offered to do a reading, channeling. That's not something I'm normally drawn to, but when I trust him, and he's just begun doing this work, and he said, I feel like I'd like to gift that to you. And I said, sure. And so we met on the phone a couple of weeks ago. And, he's talking to his guides, and he's giving me information, and he's going through the chakras, and he's saying, in the root chakra, I can see that you're really well grounded in life, that your family really loved you, you were secure and loved. And I was like, that's really true. He said, up until about 7 years old, and then something happened. And I think he was waiting for me to respond with, oh yeah, but I was like, can't think of anything. He said, okay, well, maybe the date's wrong, but I'm getting this information that maybe something happened around that age. And then he goes through the solar plexus and what's this one? The second chakra, I don't remember what he's talking about. It's all good stuff. And he gets to the heart chakra, and he says, they're telling me now that it's there's something like a door that's open and then closed, open and closed. And they hear this little 7-year-old boy saying, don't leave me, don't leave me. And I went, oh my God, Suzanne Paris, my best friend, my first best friend who let me play with her Barbies. She moved away at 7, when I was 7. And I never would have thought of that as being traumatic or changing me, but I remember crying in bed every night, praying to God, please let Suzanne move back. I miss her so much. Don't leave me. And it was just surprising because it doesn't feel like trauma. It just feels like normal families, people move things. But some message got written in me to the 7-year-old little Michael, who was like, people leave. People leave us. And so maybe that opening of the heart and closing of the heart began there. I'll guard myself. And so then my friend Mark, he did this process with me where he invited me to visualizing meditation, where I would go into this room and see little 7-year-old Michael, who's so sad that his little girlfriend has left, and that he asked me to pick him up. I can't talk about it without crying. Just hold him. And just say, I love you and I will never leave you. I will never leave you. But I have left him in my life. I have ignored his wisdom and his calling for my attention to that open-hearted little boy. I've ignored him. And what I feel like is happening, and this is brand new, ministers are really not supposed to share stuff until they fully processed it, so I've broken a rule today. But it feels like something is being returned to me of open-heartedness and trusting life. That I can now be a greater part of the healing of humanity because that sweet little 7-year-old boy is being seen and loved and reassured. And I don't know what happened to you in your life, but I know something did. And it may have been far more painful and traumatic than what I went through. And I did go through some other things that were more traumatic. But what I want to offer to us all is that now this moment, while we're alive, while we're doing our healing work, we can reclaim and rewrite the history of what that means. We can change the past. We can't change that it happened, but we can change who we are in relationship to it. The work of this healing comes in many forms and many modalities. Dr. Randall Brailsford, one of the great trauma therapists in the city, sits on our board. I highly recommend good therapy is a great way. Whatever, the recovery work, whatever you need to do, but I invite you to become that wise elder being to heal that part of you that is hurting. And here's why. Because the world needs you now to be a little bit more healed so that we can all heal together. Would you pray with me? I will never leave you. There's a commitment that is being made in my spirit, in my heart, in my mind, and my soul to be present, to be open to love, to remain open to life. And what I know is that life is trustworthy. I can trust that this energy of love and creativity that is the very foundational reality of all existence, it can be trusted. And so I'm willing to lay down any barriers to that love and creativity. I'm willing to set aside any old beliefs in judgment and exclusion and abandonment. And I know that all of us in this moment are willing to be more of who God says we are. And so we let go of that self-criticism and self-judgment. We let go of the blame of others. We let go of the pain that we've carried and held on to as identity. And we are set free by our own choice to live our truth today. And the Holy Spirit simply enfolds and lifts us up in this decision to be free. And divine intelligence shows us the way, guides us to those healers and practitioners who would help us in this journey of freedom. We are lifted and guided into the right opportunities that we may not only heal our own lives, but be a part of the healing of humanity. We see a world where I am welcomed. I belong. We see a world that welcomes and belongs all people. And so we are grateful for this opportunity to share in this hope of 7 generations, this hope, this promise of oneness, of freedom. Thank you, God. We let it be, and so it is. Amen. If no one has told you today that they love you, I do. I love you. I welcome you joining me in this journey of love and healing for us all. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.